my name is Alan and I'm a pre-sales engineer for Stonesoft. Over the next few minutes I'm going to be showing you how to use Evader, a ready-made evasion testing lab. It's designed so that you can test your own network security solution for its effectiveness against the protection and detection of advanced evasion techniques. And when I say network security system, I'm talking about things like next generation firewalls, IPS, IDS, or even UTM devices. Basically anything that will allow you to do deep inspection. AETs are a growing threat, and they're being used by well-resourced and well-skilled cyber criminals and hackers. Organizations need to know whether their systems are vulnerable to AETs or not, and that's exactly what Evader will let them do. But hey, don't take my word for it, or anybody else's word for it for that matter. You can now download Evader free from evader.stonesoft.com, and you can test against your own systems. In this environment, we're going to use Evader to test against the Stonesoft IPS solution. In your environment, you can use Evader to test against your existing security solution, any prospective new security solutions you want to deploy, or for that matter, any network security solution that you want to test it against. But now, I'm going to show you how to use the Evader interface. First off, we connect to the Evader port. That's the IP address that you've given to the attacking machine on port 8000. Once you do that, you're presented with this interface. Over here on the left-hand side, we can choose which module we want to deploy. The module is actually the exploit that we're going to deliver against our victim machine. So at this point, I just want to highlight that we're only using 2 exploits within the Evader toolset. The exploits that we're using are based on MSRPC server service vulnerability, also known as Configure, and also a very well-known HTTP vulnerability based around PHP bulletin board services. The reason why we're using old exploits is that we would expect that most security devices on the market today would be able to stop those without any problems. So the point of Evader is to try and disguise these exploits with advanced evasion techniques and deliver them through your existing network security solution, and therefore try to compromise the target or victim machine that exists behind there. I'd also like to point out at this stage that for this test we're going to use the HTTP vulnerability because we've deployed the victim host on a Linux server. If you want to test the MSRPC vulnerability or Configure vulnerability, you will need to deploy a second victim machine based on Windows XP Service Pack 2 with no further patches deployed to that system. But there are notes within the installation guide on how you can do that and what security settings should be deployed there. So for the purpose of this first test, what I need to do is, as I've done here, select the HTTP exploit. I then need to define how I'm going to send these packets out. So from the Evader or the attacking host, I need to specify which interface the attack is going to be generated from, in this case ETH0. I need to specify the source address. Now this is an important point here. You can't use the actual IP address that you gave to the attack machine when you deployed it. It has to be on the same subnet, but it has to be a different IP address because Evader uses its own TCP/IP stack. So I'm going to give it .10. The actual IP address on the attack machine is .1. The destination is the victim machine. So in this environment, 172.16.120.21. And we don't need a gateway because we're going straight through an inline IPS device. So the first thing I'm going to do is just to prove that we've got a connection or a successful connection going through the chosen security device, and in this case the Stonesoft IPS. So I'm going to send this with an actual clean payload. So it's not going to actually send the exploit through, but it just proves that we're going to get connectivity to our victim machine. So we execute, and we can see down here that we got a response. So we know that connectivity is there. So port 80 is being allowed through. It isn't being blocked or restricted in any way. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this log so that we can see what happens next. And I'm going to send this attack through now without any evasions being used. So we're going to send it through as just a native attack, no evasions being used. And what we'd expect to see here is that the Stonesoft IPS should be quite capable of blocking this attack. So if we look at our Stonesoft logs, we'll start the real live capture of logs running there. And when we come back to our Evader interface, I'm just going to execute this attack. And what we can see here is we get no shell, attack failed. The connection was terminated, which is pretty much the response I was expecting to get. And if we can confirm that in the logs, here we go, we can see that the Evader IPS sensor that we have configured here was able to detect the exploit and terminate that connection. So the next thing I want to do is try to deliver this attack now, but by using advanced evasion techniques in order to try and disguise the attack and confuse the IPS into thinking that the payload is actually legitimate. So first things again, we'll clear the log so we can see the new output. And we're now able to choose any one of these evasions. The evasions that have been included within Evader are well-known evasions and have been around for years. The evasion I'm going to use is a TCP segmentation evasion, and I'm going to set the segment size to 4 bytes. Again, we're going to execute this evasion against our target machine. And again, because we're using the Stonesoft IPS, we get no response. The attack failed. And again, we can confirm this by looking at the logs. Again, it was able to detect the attack, identify the exploit contained within, even though advanced evasions were being used. So that's a single evasion against our attack machine. And you could do that for all of the evasions in there, or you could use combinations of them. But there's also a more convenient tool that will allow you to run multiple instances of Evader to do more automated and random testing of evasions. So if I just clear these logs on here, we can start again, and we'll see the effects that that has on the logs. So if we go back to our Evader platform, I'm going to stop the execution and clear the log again. I'm going to also clear the previous evasions that we've used. And this time round, I'm going to choose the option Mongbat. Now what Mongbat allows is it allows the Evader to run as multiple instances. So depending upon the hardware that you have deployed, you can choose then whether or not how many instances of Evader you want to run. Obviously, the more instances you run, the more evasions and the more random options will be used to test your security solution. So we've chosen Mongbat. I'm going to set the mode to random. In this instance on my system, I'm just going to use 2 workers. We can set the time period for how long we want the evasions to run for, but also we can also choose how many evasions we want to run. So we set it here as a minimum of 2 evasions with a maximum of 4. And what that means, and this is part of where advanced evasion techniques come in, it's not the fact that the evasions are necessarily new, it's the fact that we can now combine them or stack them together and deliver them simultaneously to further confuse the IPS or next generation firewall, whatever the security device is that's being tested. And at this point, we can execute the command again. And if we look down here, once this starts to run, it starts to generate the random evasions. And if we take a look at our logs now, we can see that there are constant streams of terminated connections because of all the random options that are being used with the advanced evasion techniques. But thankfully, because we're using Stonesoft IPS, they're all being terminated because we're able to successfully block and capture the attacks within these advanced evasion techniques. Okay, so you've just seen how easy it is to use the Evader Evasion Testing Lab. You can now use that to test against your own security configuration, against your live policies in your production environment. And then you're left with the hard facts of whether your security device can protect against advanced evasion techniques. For more information and the free download of Evader, you can visit evader.stonesoft.com. Thanks and good luck.